I am a FromSoftware sicko. I've played every game in that loose series, many, many times. Except Dark Souls 2, you can read into that however you want. So when I first heard about Elden Ring Nightreign, I wasn't quite sure if it would be my thing. Yes, it's Elden Ring, I played so much of Elden Ring, but also it's forced multiplayer. It's got a circle, you drop in like a battle royale. It seemed nothing like Elden Ring or FromSoftware for that matter. It seemed like something I wouldn't enjoy. And to be honest, the first 10 hours, I thought it was pretty okay, but I was wrong. So let's start at the beginning here. Why wouldn't I like Elden Ring Nightreign? Well, my favorite thing about Souls games are the level design and how you engage in that world. There is a deliberate pace to those games. For me, the thing I love about those games, aside from the combat and the world building, is just how you play those games. There's a certain pace to it. You continue to fight the same boss over and over again until you figure them out, you move on. You explore every nook and cranny of a level, you see everything that you can possibly see. At least that's how I play. I usually do about 2 playthroughs like this for each of them and then multiple more times after that, but I take my time. The other thing I love about these games is that you are building out a character with skills, weapons, and stat points. And I think one of the most engaging things about those games for me is how I can build these different characters and play through these games in radically different ways. Sure, I may have had trouble on a certain boss using my strength build because the boss is in my face and I'm having trouble responding to it, or maybe the boss is really far away and I keep having to rush it down. And then I have a magic or faith build where I can use ranged attacks and I'm able to kill that boss much quicker. For me, it changes the experience, it adds a lot of replay value. And frankly, I think it's a lot of fun. I think FromSoftware, especially in the later Souls-like games, have done a very good job of creating a lot of build diversity. That pacing mixed with that character creation and those builds are kind of what really stand out for these kind of games for me. Now, when it comes to Nightreign, you kind of don't do either of those things, right? You don't create a character, you can play as different characters who are different build archetypes from those games, but you're not really doing much to shape them. At least in the traditional sense. When you level up, it's just a general stat improvement. You run up to a bonfire, I'm gonna call it a bonfire. I know it's a site of grace, but everyone does that, right? Do you call it sites of grace? Do you call them lanterns in Bloodborne?
Everything is just a soul.
It's a soul. Everything is a soul.
Everything is a soul. Runes, they're souls.
Souls. Now, obviously you can kind of tune your build a little bit depending on weapons you pick up because that changes the playstyle, and also there's secondary buffs on each of those weapons that kind of build out your character. But if you play Iron Eye, chances are you're using a bow. Or you're playing the Duchess, you're gonna use a dagger. Maybe you'll use a staff. She does have pretty good intelligence scaling. I don't think a lot of people know that. So you've got your characters, and then you kind of need to rush through Nightreign. I'd say when I first started playing Nightreign, I didn't play that way. I wanted to take my time. I wanted to see everything. I wanted to kill all of the enemies. I wanted to explore every cranny, open every chest. But that's not really the point. That doesn't really work in Nightreign. If you want to be successful, it's all about speed. You want to hit all those points of interest as quickly as possible, defeat the boss, pick up the stat boost, and move on. And that broke my brain. I think it broke a lot of people's brains because when this game first came out, it was kind of mixed, and it still is kind of mixed to this day. I think a lot of people were expecting a Souls-like game that is just persistent co-op, which, there are mods like that for Elden Ring, very popular, but I think people kind of expected this to be the official way to play Elden Ring co-op with new bosses and maybe a slight mix-up. But this is dramatically different from Elden Ring. This is dramatically different from Dark Souls, Bloodborne. Sure, that combat is still very similar, that muscle memory still comes in handy for this, but the entire way this game works is flipped on its head. And at first, I did not like that. I did not think this game was gonna be for me. But I continued to play it because I was capturing for the review we did, which you should check out. I believe we gave that a 9 out of 10. And at the time, I was like, that's a little high. That's a little high. I'm not gonna argue with Richard Wakeling. He writes like 100,000 reviews a day. So, you know, what do I know? Now that I've met Nightreign halfway and I am playing at the pace I need to play, I have found it to be one of the best multiplayer games this year. It is my go-to multiplayer game. It is the game that I play almost every night if I can get a crew together. Now, that's not to say it's perfect. There are some issues that have been addressed. But I think the big one and a big turnoff for a lot of people, myself included, was there was no two-player matchmaking. So if you had two people, you had to queue with a third. And as we know, that rando, that third person, is never that good. Now, I don't bully the third person. I try to help them out. Sometimes they just quit though because can't keep up, or I can't keep up, or they mark a place on the other side of the map and go for that by themselves and they die and I'm like, well, I'm not saving you, and then they quit.
And there's no in-game chat, which is like a genuine, like a negative to this game, I would say.
That is what I was gonna get to, yeah. So there's no in-game chat and there's no voice chat. There's not really any way to communicate apart from using your marking system, which is not very robust to begin with. And I think that is an issue, and that is understandable. I think especially when you're playing with two people and you're trying to wrangle your third person to head to a certain spot and they're just not doing that. Fortunately, you can now play duos, and that is a big change up. And they also rebalanced it so solo is doable by yourself. Because I don't know if folks remember, but when it first came out, playing solo was rough. I don't think they scaled at all, or if they did, they didn't scale very much. So earlier in this video, I mentioned that when a new FromSoftware comes out, I usually play it twice, very slowly. I try to see every square inch of that world, try to kill all the bosses, collect all the weapons, do pretty much all of the completionist stuff. However, in almost every case, I don't stop there. Every playthrough after that, I just try to get through that game as quickly as possible. I spent a lot of time in Bloodborne just rushing through that game as quick as I could, using different weapons, trying to find like the coolest builds to break certain bosses. And I find so much enjoyment in that. I'm not very good at it, you know, I'm not a professional speedrunner. I'm sure if I shared my times here for Bloodborne, or if you found them on Twitch, I think some of them are still there, you'd realize I'm not the fastest, but I had a lot of fun doing that. And I think with Elden Ring Nightreign, after I kind of tried to get sort of that slower pace to work, and it didn't work, and I had to speed things up. At first that was very off-putting, but then when I started to think about it like a speed run, like mini speed runs that last about 40 minutes with friends, where we are building our characters as quickly and as efficiently as we can in order to fight a boss that encourages us to build a specific way, given their weaknesses, it kind of becomes a FromSoftware speed running game. I know that's kind of weird to say, but that's kind of how it's developed in my head. And an example of that is finding the most efficient ways to kill bosses. There are some bosses that you can figure out tactics on how to kill them quickly and efficiently, and the faster you do that, that means the faster you can move on to another area where you can kill another boss, and another boss, and another boss. On top of that, because all of the points of interest in the map scramble on each run, at the beginning, you kind of have to start plotting your path through that world right away. So one thing that I'm sure a lot of people know about, like Dark Souls 1 especially, is when you start a new game and you've played it a few times, you figure out the build you want, and then mentally you kind of come up with the map that you have to travel through the world. Like, okay, normally I'd go here, but I can skip that and go over to this side if I get through this enemy, and I can get this weapon, which is gonna help me get the build I want. For me, I kind of get that same feeling in Nightreign, where you know, you get that cutscene where you're flying over the map and then you see the map and you look at it and immediately my brain starts firing. I'm like, okay, we're near a church. Let's all drop at the church. We're gonna pick this up and then we wanna go to the cathedral. We don't need to kill this boss because it's not gonna give us a lot, but we can take the stone sword key, head to an Everjail. We can fight the Everjail boss, and then that should put us in the lake. And from the lake, we can fight the boss that normally spawns there if it's not the bell-bearing hunter. The bell-bearing hunter. And then we can run up through the river into the castle, fight the boss under the castle if it's not the bell-bearing hunter. The bell-bearing hunter.
Run.
And then we can clear out all the enemies there, head up to the top, kill that enemy if it's not the bell-bearing hunter. The bell-bearing hunter. and hopefully we're prepared for the boss. And that's kind of the final thing that kind of keeps me so engaged after 100 hours, is that while each run maybe isn't as distinct as you'd see in other roguelike games, I feel like there is just enough to keep each run fresh. Each run you kind of have to plan out differently. Each run you have to figure out different ways to kind of master your environment and your enemies in order to put yourself into a position to fight one of the bosses. And just to put it out there, I think the Night Lord bosses in Elden Ring Nightreign are some of the coolest, most cinematic bosses that FromSoftware has ever done. The music for each one is really, really good, and these bosses are behemoths. Really need to buckle down. You really need to figure out how you're going to work together, how your different character abilities are going to work together in order to come out victorious. So yeah, after 100 hours, I am addicted to Elden Ring Nightreign. I plan on playing a lot more, especially considering FromSoft has said that there will be some DLC for this. And it's already got my brain firing about, okay, what archetypes have not been covered with the characters in the game so far? What bosses from older games could be cool? Can they strike a deal with Sony to put some Bloodborne references in there? Probably not, but that would be pretty cool. Anyway, all that to say, I really like Nightreign. Let me know what you think so far. Did you fall off because of the communication issues, or you didn't like that you couldn't do duos? Let me know in the comments below, and we'll see you next time.